Hi, I'm Seamless, and today I'm going to show you how to take this sound and turn it into this sound. So here's the before. And here is the after. Yeah. So this is all about resampling, but specifically resampling inside phase plant and doing it with a sequence like this that's tuned and tuning the resampling so that when I play these notes and I have FM and stuff happening in post, that it's all tuned and correct and followed as if it were all like just continued generation on the original piece. That's what this is about. So I'm going to go over every piece of how all of this stuff was designed, but the main way that this was done is that you record your sample, your synth line of whatever length it was, and you plop it into a sampler, and then you have this offset. This is the sample start offset, and what I have done is that it doesn't change the sample's location while you're playing it, and only updates when you play a new note. So I have an automation clip that's just this line that goes all the way up and down, and as it scans through, when it is playing the new note, it's playing the location in the sample where that original note actually was also originally played. The next step is to get it to be pitched correctly. And the way that this works out is that you set it to be center, which is A4, and then you note track it with one of the MIDI note thingies here, but you track it opposite. You track it on pitch over here. And this offsets the note so that it's always the original pitch, which, because the notes change in here and it's lined up and we have the right MIDI from the original sequence, it all lines up and comes out to sound the original way it's supposed to, and we have note tracked additional nonsense to add on to other stuff. That is the way this works. Now let's go over the nitty gritty and actually show how all the things were done from the beginning. So nothing terribly interesting was done in this guy. This is a saw wave that's filtered, that's distorted, that's filtered, that's distorted, with all of its bits modulated and turned on and whatever. But the fun thing about this guy is this section here, where I am using the aux inputs to phase against each other the distorted signal and the original signal. Not just the signal from before this distortion, but before all of this stuff. And I'm phase canceling it against that, which means that the resulting is going to be just the stuff that's different about it. And then I am filtering that with a high pass filter, and then this is getting combined with the original version of the mix that's also being filtered through this other group with a band pass filter, and then right at the very end there's a triangle, just oscillator just layered against it, and that's filling it up on the end there with the distorted processing that's going pretty hard, but with the low end smoothness because of the band pass that's engaged in the focus in that area there, and then just a straight up sub through the triangle availability, and that's this sound. This guy, not a whole lot else. I don't think I'm even using any unison shenanigans. I barely am doing Reese stuff. Like, some things are detuned, but it's extremely just like, I knew I was going to go places with it in post, so I didn't try super hard to make it by itself be a thing. But this is what it sounded like by itself. Next step was to compress its ass off and to reclaim some of that textural presence. And this is mostly just focusing the areas where the motion needs to be and then just jacking it up OTT style. And these two Valhalla rooms are short, tight reverbs. And with the combination of the delay that I'm automating the time position of, this is a lot more air than I would normally go on a thing. And this is because I knew that when I got to the third step of this, or the second step too, that I was going to be doing stuff with it in post-modulation that would account for how smoothed out this was going to make it. Next step was to beef it up, but I used my beefener here, which is just the phase split saturation, also mid-side split. So I'm doing that. Here's the distortion being phased against itself so that I can combine the original clean signal and the dirty parts of whatever part of the spectrum I want, and it'll also be phased against it so that it's not competing necessarily. And then it's also doing that for the side, separate from the mid, so that they're not colliding with each other when you can just distort them, and that's the whole point of this thing. It's just a good idea to do this in general, and the only reason why I haven't been doing it forever is because I hadn't made one of these yet. This patching up that, so I don't have to make this connection every time, because it's kind of a lot of work. But not so much when you can just, and then there it is, and yay, cool. And then bandpass notch notch, automated, compressed, bandpass notch notch, automated, compressed. This is not being automated. This is me 4-banding it in Maximus. So what's happening here is this, because this guy was so very low, and also just everything's everywhere. So in order to get like consistent and like full spectrum presence, what I needed to do was to focus the bands on all the areas, not just the 3 that are there usually. So what we did, I disabled the high band so that low band and mid band are doing their compression, and then there's still audio coming through here. It's just not being compressed, and then also the master band's not compressing either. So these two dudes are happening. And then over here, I muted the compression on the low band. So you can still hear the low band, but it's not being compressed, which is already compressed. And now it's as if the filter cut was already just in there with this 4th band in there in Maximus, and it's going into the master of this Maximus. So that's how we get extra bands in Maximus. And you line up all the values, and it makes it work out. It's as if it were a multi-band. And that's what got us to here. And that's a bunch of these guys up here. So here's our delay time modulation. Here's our bandpass notch notch, and then bandpass notch notch. Notice that there's this guy, and he's like, fairly quick and moving around. And I actually made a pretty conscious choice the second time with the next bandpass to not be as fast about it, so that you could actually still hear the original modulation in there and still have extra motion plus. Extra motion plus. I remember the Wii Motion Plus. All right, so these guys are all modulations that are on the resampled steps. So here's the first resampled step. There's actually a bit between that last one that we heard. So this guy, here's our sample. We dropped him in there, and there's 2 of them in here because I wanted to do more literal unison. There is unison that you can just engage up here, but there's no unison in the per sample like there is in the individual oscillators. So making unison means being literal. And this is basically what you used resampling for in the very oldest sense. And the things that originally made me get into doing resampling in the first place was doing basically this stuff inside Harmor. And now it's just happening the way it is here. What's fun, though, is that I got here by doing pretty large amount of work and then deciding that I wanted the unison part of it. So I cloned it, and it got some of the, it got the pitch tracking modulations all correct, but it didn't have its modulations also modulating elsewhere, which I didn't want to do, so that's good. But the result of this is that the modulation from the original source signal is not unison, even though the audio is, which had a fun result. So here's that fun result. Here is that fun result. Yeah. So this guy is just now, okay, now let's just do some things to our sample to try and make it spicy. And the steps and things that I went to in this one really mussed it up kind of a lot. And so much so that I had to, the ending of it was to put on a pretty harsh high bandpass, low pass cut on post after the compression. And then it required the 3rd step to really nail it home. But what's happening in here? Something fun? Well, here's something interesting about what happens when you use a sample as a modulation source. You see it move. So you can kind of hear some of that dirt in there, and a lot of what was in here is about managing the dirt while having an effects. And so mostly that's what this is in post here, is using ring modulation and the phase distortion through the sidebanding stuff to kind of control what the processing and the phased out stuff from that original, because it was pretty smooth. The original got smoothed out. This one added some bite. This established character and air, and then this got a little too far on texture. This is our macro one, which is controlling the offset for all the samples and all of the playbacks. And then here's macro 2, which is a high pass filter plus some of the other filters inside the 2nd step. And this is that high pass, low pass combo. And now that's the thing that got recorded and stuck into our 3rd guy. So this is like the most close to hardware-ish thing that I've done with Faceplant, and also not just like setup wise, but also result wise. Like it's sounding like that is a pretty hardware-y thing, and this is more or less like because of the same reasons. I have a saw wave and a sine wave modulating the source and also modulating each other. Now the intensity of modulation is a product of how loud the oscillators are. So the macros are connected to how loud just each individual oscillator is, and you can pretty well see what's up when they collide. And so they're there mostly as like stabs and effects, like variations on the sound. But because it's modulating themselves and each other and the source, any micro adjustment in position in and also position relative to each other is a tremendous difference. Oops. Do. And I muted you. So this saw wave that's modulating, this is the saw waves level and this is the sine waves level. The saw wave is very high frequency. It's ratio like 14 or something, very high. And this is a regular base level sine wave. So when you can see here that like when it's not being modulated by the sine wave, it's very like metallic and sharp. And then here comes the sine wave and it like modulates it up. There's an example of a very low note being played, so we get the whip of sine wave FM on something. And this is just what it sounds like when you do like hardware stuff. And the setup and the processing, the logic for it is very hardware-esque. I keep bringing that up because this is sort of the being able to do this kind of crap digitally, not just because like we want like hardware life and digital life, like we want to be able to do things to our path, especially in a plugin like this. Like Serum has Serum effects, so you can use Serum's effects rack in post and keep like you can, if you're using Serum, you're like, oh, I want more filters. The Serum's filter, you can just have that in there and have more of that. And then here's Faceplant, and it's like, okay, well, I did all this, I made all that, but then I wanted to like FM it in post. And sure, there's some steps to get there to that degree, but now you just can. And you could do the exact same stuff that you were doing in your generation to the thing that's effectively processed audio. And this feels like something obvious and easy now, but this is very bleeding edge, very new, very awesome stuff. And this is like being able to have pulled this off without a lick of hardware is particularly awesome. And I'm just really a big fan of Faceplant. Anyway, this FLP will be available to download. There's some extra junk in here. Don't worry about it. It's my template. Doesn't mean anything right now. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.